A few weeks ago, we introduced you to Duck, a malnourished dog who was near death and collapsed in a Spokane woman's front lawn. We also introduced you to that woman who found Duck, Amber Worrell. Worrell was able to get Duck treatment and saved his life. However, while trying to help Duck, Worrell sought the assistance of SCRAPS, but was initially turned away. Here's a recording of that initial call between Worrell and a third party that fields after-hour calls for SCRAPS.
I've called the emergency clinics and they won't take them. They said that I have to call you guys.
Okay. So unfortunately, if the dog is not physically injured, like any bite wounds or scratch marks or anything like that, open wounds, then they won't come out and get him.
So there's no way to get this dog help unless I financially take care of it?
Unfortunately, as of right now, they will not come out due to just the high call volume.
After my story aired, Spokane County said they'll work on more training for the dispatchers. But following my story, I heard from many people about a variety of issues involving SCRAPS. I began working on one of the most common ones, behavioral assessments for so-called dangerous dogs. Some believe the assessments are stacked against the dogs. So I went to SCRAPS to see what I could find. I visited the SCRAPS headquarters in Spokane Valley to see an assessment of dangerous dogs. A group from California, the Canine Assessment of Risk for Shelters, or CARS, came to Spokane to do the assessment for 20 dogs. The purpose, to determine if these dogs can be rehabilitated or not. All 20 dogs in this assessment are deemed dangerous. Some former volunteers and former employees at SCRAPS who reached out to me about these assessments call them archaic. The concern amongst the former staff is that the behavioral tests are not an adequate measure of how safe a dog is, and that if a dog does not perform well in the assessments, the dog could be euthanized.
Behavior assessments are like flipping a coin.
Last week I spoke with Brianna Franzen, a former SCRAPS employee who claims she was terminated due to disagreements with SCRAPS director Jesse Ferrari.
You cannot predict future aggression or future behavior based on assessment and a battery of one-time tests.
Kevin Van Hook volunteered at SCRAPS for roughly 5 years and then became an employee working on the SCRAPS dog team. He says he was fired in February after an argument with Ferrari about the behavioral assessments.
In that meeting, another employee brought up the fact that everyone knew that management was looking to have outside individuals assess the dogs, which had been done time to time. It's not necessarily uncommon. However, they were doing it in secret and did not want to share that information with the rest of the team, which I felt was detrimental.
Alicia Spots was a volunteer on the dog team at SCRAPS. She claims she was fired after advocating against euthanizing a dog, Amelia. Spots remains adamantly against the behavioral assessments.
My understanding, people from California are being flown up to do these assessments. So these dogs are supposed to meet with people that they don't know, and some other pretty archaic assessments, if you will, of their behavior. So I absolutely don't agree with that.
According to the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, or ASPCA, behavior assessments have not proven highly accurate or precise when used to predict aggression after adoption. We took these concerns to SCRAPS and met with Nick Hobbs-Doyle, the shelter operations manager, and director Jesse Ferrari. They claim that these tests are important and ethical, as it's the shelter's duty to keep the community and the animals safe.
The assessments are all about understanding dog behavior. So we brought in specialists that are nationally recognized to really provide some great insight to what Spokane County is offering.
I think that overall is encompassing for safety within the community rather than just adopt a dog out and kind of fingers crossed scenario. I think this is a whole lot better way to help protect against potentially dangerous dogs in the community.
For the dogs that do not perform well in the assessments,
the CARS team provides recommendations on how to humanely and ethically house that animal in the event that it was to enter our community as well. So if a dog that was evaluated here was to be adopted and moved out to our community, what would it take to safely house that animal?
It's a story with many different viewpoints. The assessments were supposed to conclude last week, and now the next phase will be collecting the data and deciding how to move forward with the animals. In the studio, I'm Steffi Roche, Nonstop Local. I was able to confirm that 14 dogs were euthanized Wednesday morning. And you might remember my reporting regarding the behavioral assessments at SCRAPS. And I've been covering the concerns over SCRAPS practices for over a month. But now with this new development, this story is far from being over. On Wednesday morning, I received a text from Kevin Van Hook, a former SCRAPS employee who was fired months ago after an argument regarding the behavioral assessments with SCRAPS director Jesse Ferrari.
I learned at about 11 a.m. that SCRAPS senior management had executed a mass execution.
Van Hook says a current employee at SCRAPS told him about it. Van Hook claims the current staff member and other employees found out about the euthanizations after they'd already been done. Van Hook and others do not believe these dogs are a danger to society, but that the assessments they underwent were stacked against the dogs.
As we had predicted, these dogs would fail. Every single one of them so far has failed. They've executed them.
Why do you use the word execute?
Euthanasia means good death, and in some cases that is correct. When an animal is suffering, to end that suffering, when it's irreversible, you would use euthanasia. These dogs did not get a euthanasia. They were executed.
The deaths of these 14 dogs comes the same month Spokane City Council members Michael Cathcart and Karen Stratton released a statement regarding the treatment of animals at SCRAPS. The city contracts with SCRAPS for animal services, and both council members have been working on an ordinance to make it more difficult to euthanize animals.
And it feels almost like retribution for the ordinance that we put out a week ago.
That ordinance would ensure that animals at SCRAPS are euthanized only when necessary, but it hasn't passed yet, hasn't even been voted on, which is why City Council member Cathcart says he was surprised to hear that SCRAPS had taken the steps it did. He says he's disturbed by a number of issues, one of them being what he calls a total lack of transparency from SCRAPS about their plans.
I learned it from a text message from you that the SCRAPS organization made the decision to euthanize 14 dogs, and it's frankly, it's pretty egregious.
I also reached out to Spokane County for their side of the story and talked with Patrick Bell, the county's communications director.
The assessment is not the tool that ultimately decides euthanasia. That's humane euthanasia is at the discretion of our director, and it's only ever employed as a last resort. I just want to be clear, SCRAPS does not use euthanasia or euthanize animals due to capacity issues. The dogs that were euthanized, that were part of that 14, it was only because they were an untreatable threat and thus a public safety risk.
Bell says many of the dogs assessed had histories of dangerous bites and aggressive tendencies. Spokane County published a statement on their website that the public can view regarding the behavioral assessments. It includes 16 files regarding 16 dogs, but it's unclear if these were the dogs euthanized. Patrick Bell wasn't even sure.
There was no proactive statement or proactive effort by SCRAPS to let the public know that this decision was made, and here's why. In fact, if you read those behavioral assessments, it really doesn't even give you a clear picture as to which animals were actually euthanized.
Spokane City Council issued a statement Wednesday calling on SCRAPS to attend their meeting on Monday to answer their questions.
Well, we appreciate the invitation. The shelter operations and management is really dedicated to the facility here. We think it would be even more advantageous if the City Council were to come to SCRAPS to sit down with us.
I feel like I have lost all trust in their leadership at SCRAPS.
The first reading of the ordinance was supposed to be in a few weeks, but now with this new development, the City Council will be voting on it on Monday. Reporting in Spokane Valley, I'm Steffi Roche, Nonstop Local. It's going to change euthanasia standards for dogs that were found within the city of Spokane and then taken to SCRAPS. But this city ordinance will have no effect on the county ordinance. Monday's City Council meeting was filled with people and heartfelt testimonies.
Today I found out that 14 of them were killed for no reason. This made me really sad because I didn't even get to say goodbye. I didn't want them to die. I prayed they wouldn't die. I wish I could have saved them.
In a vote of 6-0, the euthanasia ordinance was approved.
What we approved last night is kind of a stopgap measure. It really just says that in the city of Spokane, so if there's an animal that's taken from the city, that, you know, we have a different euthanasia standard that's applied, and that means that you cannot kill for capacity, essentially.
The new ordinance lays out the parameters required for euthanization. If it's for physical reasons, the health concern must have been passed through a vet. If it's for behavioral reasons, the decision to euthanize must now be approved by an advisory board. Patrick Bell, the communications manager for Spokane County, says the city council's claims are inappropriate and untrue.
It's important that we are armed with the facts and armed with the truth. The truth is that SCRAPS does not euthanize animals due to capacity issues.
With this ordinance passing, Spokane County is planning on their next steps.
We expect after the vote last night that we'll enter dispute resolution, which is according to the contract, where either party, if there's a dispute, can bring forward a list of itemized concerns with evidence, Steffi, and then we'll enter into a discussion.
At Tuesday's county commissioners meeting, the CEO of the county made a statement regarding what's happening at SCRAPS.
I want to ensure the community that Spokane County and its Spokane County Regional Animal Protection Service, SCRAPS, are committed to the highest standards of care and ethical treatment of animals at SCRAPS, while also protecting public safety. Unfortunately, during this past couple of months, we've had a couple of city council members who have allowed these incorrect narratives to be perpetuated at their city council meetings. Despite multiple meetings with these council members to provide them with actual facts surrounding SCRAPS, they have yet to acknowledge a different narrative than what they're hearing from a small group of community activists.
So while the city has approved of the ordinance, it's difficult to see what, if any, change will come from this.
I think the only real concrete solution is a regional one that's supported by the county and SCRAPS, and so that's what we're going to continue to work towards.
And Cathcart added that he would eventually love to see a citizens advisory board where members of the community come together to increase transparency with SCRAPS. Reporting live in downtown Spokane, I'm Steffi Roche, Nonstop Local. We're here in the Garland district outside the business owned by the family whose cat was euthanized Friday. Outside the business, this memorial was created to remember that cat. But now the family wants to hold SCRAPS accountable.
On Thursday night, Taya Nelms' family cat Dewey wandered away from their Spokane Valley home. The next morning, Friday, when the cat still had not returned home, Nelms was terrified. After searching for Dewey, she went to school and work. Later that day, she saw a post on Facebook regarding a missing cat, which she recognized as her cat. The post said the cat had been taken to SCRAPS.
I quickly got into my car and sped all the way to SCRAPS to hopefully retrieve my cat, but unfortunately that was not the case. They euthanized him within an hour of being there. And apparently they said he was in kidney failure. I found that out after probably an hour and a half of being at SCRAPS. It took them forever to even have someone come out and talk to my mom and I.
According to Spokane County, Dewey arrived at SCRAPS around 10:47 a.m. and was euthanized between 11 a.m. and noon. Both the Nelms family and the county confirmed that Dewey was not microchipped, tagged, nor was he wearing a collar. According to Patrick Bell, the communications director for Spokane County, a call came into SCRAPS answering service Friday morning stating the cat was laying in a roadway and was not moving.
He looks sick.
He looks sick?
Yeah, there's something wrong. He can barely move. I took him in my maintenance room and gave him food and water, and he can't eat. He went up to the water like he wanted to drink, but he's sitting there just looking at it, and he looks sick. His eyes look like they're about shut. He doesn't look in good shape.
In a statement, Bell wrote, quote, "Upon being notified that a sick cat had been brought to the facility, our licensed veterinarian conducted a thorough medical exam on the cat, ran blood/lab work, and diagnosed the cat to be suffering from severe dehydration and end-stage kidney failure. The cat was assessed to be actively dying on the exam table during the medical exam. Due to this medical assessment and with no indication of an owner, the decision was made to humanely euthanize the cat the same day to ease the cat's suffering." End quote. Bell added that if nothing else, this story should serve as an urgent reminder to microchip and tag pets. Scraps argues that because the cat had no identification, the only decision available to them was to euthanize what they deemed to be a dying cat. But the Nelms family were devastated and infuriated to learn Scraps went ahead with euthanizing their cat without waiting to see if anyone would come to claim him.
For them to just kill him just because he, according to them, had kidney failure. And even if that was the case, it was still my animal. It was the one thing I saw every morning, I slept with every night. I took care of him like crazy. He got anything and everything he wanted. And so it just hurts to know that they could just do something like that to someone's animal and honestly not care at all.
Nelms says she wants to see Scraps' leadership held accountable.
Hopefully something can change because it needs to really badly.
I also talked to Spokane City Council member Michael Cathcart, and he says the council plans to discuss the situation at the council's study session on Thursday. Reporting in Spokane, I'm Steffi Roche, Nonstop Local. Hi, Sean. Well, I confirmed with Spokane County that 2 dogs found in the city of Spokane were euthanized this week. I met with Spokane City Council member Michael Cathcart, who said this is a clear violation of that ordinance.
To put that out there just 4 weeks ago and then to turn around and euthanize that dog, a dog from the city of Spokane where we have an ordinance that says you're not going to euthanize for capacity.
Scraps under fire again for euthanizing 2 more dogs, Notorious DOG and Ben. County spokesman Patrick Bell provided me with these behavioral assessments for both dogs. Concerning behavior includes kennel fighting, severe bite reaction, and quick turning when touched. Both dogs found to be unsuitable to children and had other restrictions for adults, including recommended muzzle training. It's a big switch for at least one of the dogs. Back on October 13th, Scraps posted this Facebook post advertising Notorious DOG was up for adoption. Bell says that's not unheard of, as there are ongoing assessments and observations. Both dogs were euthanized Tuesday. Patrick Bell sent me this statement, quote, "Recently, 2 impounded dogs with aggressive behaviors were assessed to be an untreatable threat. As a public safety risk, the dogs were not adoptable. Both were humanely euthanized in accordance with SCRAPS policies, local and state laws, and our obligations as an animal control agency." Kevin Van Hook, a former employee at SCRAPS who was fired earlier this year, says current volunteers and staff at SCRAPS were unaware of the euthanasias. He claims they reported these incidents to him and other former SCRAPS staff.
These dogs, over their time at SCRAPS, have been noticed with maybe perhaps some resource guarding, light leash biting, things that all dogs there tend to go through. And then for no reason, no notice to any staff or volunteers, they were all killed quite quickly, done really under the radar with as little fanfare as possible.
Yeah. Spokane City Council member Michael Cathcart says this is just a step too far, and he'd like to see a leadership change at SCRAPS.
We need more information, but it's absolutely absurd that they are continuing to put these dogs down, even though they understand that we have a strong concern with this. We've unanimously passed policies, with one abstention, but policies that says, you know, this is not the way we want SCRAPS to act in the city. And it's just so infuriating that they continue to do the same thing time and time and time again.
And I did reach out a short time ago to Cathcart, who said he stands by his plan to push for a change of leadership at SCRAPS. I asked if he'd push for that to be on the legislative agenda this year. He said he is in discussions with the current city council president, but may hold off on any new agenda items until the new council president, Betsy Wilkerson, takes control in January. In the studio, I'm Steffi Roche, Nonstop Local.
Nonstop Local Steffi Roche sat down with SCRAPS Director Jesse Ferrari and Shelters Operation Manager Nick Hobbs Doyle and has the story.
I came on board October of 2022 as an intern and then officially hired on January of 2023.
I was hired December 2022.
Both previously worked in the military or, for Hobbs Doyle, the state lottery as well, before working at SCRAPS.
It is no secret that there has been, some controversy and buzz regarding SCRAPS' euthanasia policies, especially with former staff, former volunteers here. What is the policy here at SCRAPS for euthanasia?
So, as we've said in the past, SCRAPS does not euthanize animals for space, period.
Both emphasize with me that euthanasia is always a last resort at SCRAPS.
Spokane City Council has called SCRAPS' euthanasia policies into question, particularly when 14 dogs were euthanized in one day back in September following the behavior assessments. What is your response as SCRAPS leaders about the concerns over those 14 dogs who were euthanized back in September?
So I think the legal, that's running through the legal process right now. I don't have a comment on that. I don't know where they are in the process, and it would probably be inappropriate for me to make a comment on that.
Following that day, Spokane City Council passed an ordinance stating SCRAPS cannot euthanize dogs found in the city due to capacity reasons. Since that passed, 4 dogs, all found in the city, as confirmed by county spokesman Pat Bell, were euthanized for behavior reasons. Then, on November 17th, I interviewed Spokane Council member Michael Cathcart regarding 2 other dogs who were euthanized. One dog, Notorious DOG, was found in the city of Spokane. He was euthanized almost 1 month after SCRAPS advertised he was up for adoption.
Is this in any way a violation of the city of Spokane's ordinance?
Again, I'll have to refer you to the legal side of the house for that.
I asked Councilmember Cathcart if he was looking to move forward with new leadership at SCRAPS, and he said, quote, "Yes, I stand by it."
We're employed through Spokane County. We're not employed with the city. The city has a contract with Spokane County. Legislation through the city would not affect our employment.
I believe our decisions are based off of common sense and factual information. These individuals that continuously spout things off to see what sticks to the wall, which, ultimately gets you guys in the door, they really need to stop. I mean, their campaign of misinformation and disinformation, twisted information, is really sending some mixed signals out to the citizens of Spokane County and obviously some elected officials within the city. It needs to stop. They need to take a common sense approach and start to factor in public safety and not just their personal ideology and how they feel about animals.
Both Ferrari and Hobbs Doyle emphasize SCRAPS' mission to protect people in the community along with other animals. In Spokane Valley, I'm Steffi Roche, Nonstop Local.
We've looked into euthanasia policies at other nearby animal agencies. Companions Animal Center, formerly Kootenai Humane Society, say they are a no-kill shelter, stating they never euthanize for capacity, only for medical reasons if an animal is suffering. Additionally, a canine behavioralist can decide to euthanize a dog if it's deemed to be vicious and cannot be rehabilitated. Spokanimal is similar. For medical euthanasia, it is up to their veterinarians. For behavior, house staff, volunteers, and the director will meet to determine if there is a way to modify that behavior. If not, the dog can be euthanized for behavioral reasons. SCRAPS states their policies are similar to both Companions Animal Center and Spokanimal.